Welcome, participants. It's very nice to be here on this Friday morning at Amsterdam time, wherever you are and you're joining us. A very, very warm welcome. This is already the final day of the conference, but we have a great program ahead. We will start and kick off this morning here in Amsterdam with the keynote by Professor Ilona Otto. We will introduce her in more detail, but before we do this, I want to briefly lay out what is still in store for us. We have the opportunity to get together today at 1 o'clock European time for a conversation among ourselves to discuss, we call that a talking circle, what we take away from the conference. I want to invite you all to join that. It is a way to network, to strengthen our connections and to discuss what we actually have learned. And then of course there will be an official closing plenary today, 4 o'clock Central European time, where we reflect on the conference and everything we learned. And I want to say I've spent actually the entire day yesterday reading through all the abstracts, the papers, the presentations, and watching all the great media content. And I'm very, very impressed by the breadth of ideas from education to photography to architecture, the social sciences. And I really took away a lot of great ideas how we can accelerate into the future. But now it is time to hear from an expert, and I'm very happy that we have one speaking this morning. I want to hand over to my colleague Stuart to introduce our speaker of this morning. Stuart, please.
Thank you, Philip. Indeed, good morning to you all in the world, and very great to, very honored to introduce Dr. Ilona Otto, Professor Otto, to our fourth keynote speech today. Ilona is a professor in societal impacts of climate change at the Wegener Center for Climate and Global Change. And Ilona analyzes social tipping dynamics for the stabilization of the Earth's climate, as well as the implications and implementation of human agency for modeling human environmental system interactions. So she combines various databases, research methods, stakeholders' knowledge in analyzing problems related to global environmental changes, development, adaptation, and sustainability. Dr. Otto, Professor Otto, she leads two major research projects, Cascades, funded by the Horizon 2020 program, and Reboost, funded also by EIT, Climate KIC. And both projects are grounded in complex system science and committed to generating transdisciplinary knowledge addressing challenges of the global sustainability transformation. Looking forward to this great keynote presentation. Ilona, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and giving me a chance to present my work at the conference. And of course, it's a pity I'm not there in person. I would travel by train, I should say. But still very nice to see you virtually. And I should say that I studied in Holland. Actually, I spent 1 year in Rotterdam and 1 year, or half a year in Wageningen. So it has been, yeah, very, very good time of my studies and life. And I'm always happy to return or to do something with Dutch colleagues. Okay, so I will now try to upload my presentation. Okay, the first technical problem is there. So it seems like the host needs to allow me to upload my presentation. Could someone, so you need to kind of give me the permission to upload my presentation?
To use it now.
Okay, yes. Now so I just put it in the presentation mode. Okay, so I hope you can see my slides, right?
Yes.
And I hope you will also see the slides changing. So yesterday on the presentation, they got stuck at some stage, but okay, let's see. So, but just give me a sign if it's not changing. Yeah, so I will talk today about social tipping dynamics and abrupt system changes and how to somehow now make sense of those changes that are happening now. And kind of first like to give a bit of a context. So what is the challenge? So probably, well, you are in this field, so you know very well, but just to kind of remind what are the risks we are trying to avoid. So those two maps, they show the differences in the climate or global temperatures at the end of the century. In the scenario that is sort of like below 2 degrees at the end of the century, so kind of Paris compatible, and a scenario that is going kind of far away from this. So this is the scenario, kind of the pessimistic scenario, with global temperatures warming by 4 degrees on average and more by the end of the century. And I like this slide because it shows that the challenges, and sort of like if you look at this below 2 degrees scenario, it's of course not easy, but it's sort of it means, okay, somehow we will manage to adapt. But if you look at this 4 degrees scenario, then kind of it poses the question that it will be probably very difficult to produce food, or even to kind of maintain national borders. And this scenario means like a very rapid and kind of very also destructive, probably changes that might even mean sort of like the end of the economy or sort of the global order as we know it. And also it's sort of like obvious that that sort of like the problem will be not solved by its own. Yeah, so there are still like massive amounts of fossil fuel resources available in the ground, and we need like very strong and rapid changes to keep those resources underground. And sort of so what I do in my work, I kind of look at the historical changes and I ask how we can get to this kind of Paris compatible scenario. So this this purple line shows the emission projections in the future that are compatible or within the Paris range. And the red line, this is the 4 degrees scenario at the end of the century. And what can we see here? And the black curve is these are the historic emissions. And what we see here is that first of all, we are not yet on this Paris pathway. Second of all, like if you look at the historic emissions, like the periods where the rate of emission change reduced for longer time were actually associated to periods of kind of social collapse and massive destruction. So this was like the Second World War and the collapse of communism. And of course, you can see that it was not the purpose of war to reduce the emissions, but but it kind of it allows us to imagine what it actually means, like if we like radically change the type of energy or reduce the energy that we use. And of course, something like this is happening right now as well. And actually, the emissions started to decrease as a result of our recent corona crisis. And it's true the emissions reduced. Last year, I think globally it was about 7%. So actually, it means like we are getting. This is exactly sort of like the rate of emission reduction that we need to get on this Paris pathway. But of course, this kind of destructive and human suffering element is not what we want to achieve. And there's also a risk that as soon as the travel restrictions are released, like people will start traveling again, and like the economy will sort of get back on this kind of business as usual pathway. So the question is how we can achieve and kind of maintain those this kind of rapid social change, but also in a kind of positive way. And now a bit of a theory. So actually, if you look at social sciences in the 20th century, it has, or it mostly kind of occupied that with sort of like linear changes. Yes, so there was this kind of idea that that sort of nothing new will be there, and there will be sort of like this progress, kind of continuous progress and development, kind of more or less in the same direction. And there were like very few theories that that were asking about sort of like kind of exponential changes or kind of rapid changes, or also kind of like social disruption, yeah, and crises. So it wasn't really there, kind of from the theory point of view. And also kind of if you look even at data analysis tool, actually there are like in econometrics, like there are actually not so many models for kind of even analyzing data and kind of detecting like rapid change, or also sort of like yeah, like kind of like sort of like tipping points, or also abrupt system changes. Yeah, so so this is something what is missing, and kind of me and my colleagues will try to advance in that area. However, it's not that there was nothing. Yeah, so there were some interesting examples. So there was literature, for instance, on Russia's segregation that showed that there's like a tipping point in Russia's segregation of neighborhoods. So it was in the 50s in the US. And sort of, if you have like more than 30% of people with the other skin color, like then the others tend to move out. Yeah, so of course, no, it's kind of Russia, but this research was done in the 50s in the US. But sort of, you know, but there were some examples that that this is actually that there are those kind of non-linear changes in the society. Also kind of in research on public opinion and also norm changes and also financial markets, there was also some literature trying to analyze this data and showing that actually those rapid changes are possible. Yeah, that there are those kind of rapid shifts in like social norms, public opinion, but also in financial markets. And they can lead under certain conditions to also to kind of polarization or crises or disruption. And there's also some evidence from behavioral experiments that shows that actually, like in the norm change, you actually don't need like the whole population to change the norm, that it's enough that you have sort of like a critical kind of committed minority of around 25%. And this minority can change the norms within the groups. No? So if they decide or kind of are committed to the change and kind of this kind of show the change, like the others will follow. Yes, so this was sort of like the literature that kind of guided my questions of like how to achieve those rapid changes in decarbonization. And then, you know, so I proposed this theory of social tipping element, which sort of basically is very similar to the theory of of tipping elements in the climate system. So kind of if you think about tipping elements in the climate system and societal systems, the basic definition is very similar. So these are like part of the system that have this ability to undergo this kind of very rapid changes, and also not those changes, those system elements, they are likely to achieve the kind of macro properties of the whole system. Yes, so we are not interested in all kinds of social subsystems that are changing quickly, but only in those that have that are likely to affect the whole system dynamics. Yeah, but there are also some differences. So in the social systems, of course, the time scales are different. Yeah, so things are happening. So kind of the things that are relevant for us are happening kind of at shorter time scales than in the climate system. And also, like a very important element is that human agents, they have the agency. You know, so in a way they are reflexive, and they can also intervene in the system, yeah, and push it in the desired direction. So this is kind of this important distinction, yeah, that also to talk about kind of interventions, the social tipping interventions, which are the interventions that are likely to intervene in the system sub-elements and push the whole system to a different state. Okay, and in my research, maybe this looks a bit overwhelming, but just to kind of show you that my research are kind of grounded in the data and various kind of empirical examples. In my research, I asked international experts, but also did literature review, and we also looked at data from empirical case studies to actually distinguish those kind of social elements or social system elements that are likely to affect the whole system dynamics and lead to rapid reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions. And we distinguish kind of 6 main tipping elements. This is the energy production storage system, human settlements, financial markets, norms and value system, education system, and information feedbacks. And here are those kind of tipping interventions, actually what you have to do to push the systems or subsystems into those kind of nonlinear changes. This is a subsidy program, decentralized energy generation, carbon neutral cities, divestment movement, recognizing the immoral character of fossil fuels, climate education, and emission information disclosure. So in other terms, kind of having a label where you could see the emissions related to certain products or services. And what those, and here are some more details about the control parameters and the potential to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and also time needed to trigger the tipping. However, what those elements have in common is actually that in all those aspects, we observe those kind of dynamics that the minority can in a way tip the majority. So for instance, in the financial markets, the divestment movement. So we looked at some investment models that show that you actually don't need to convince all financial investors to divest. You only need this kind of critical minority, which is about 10% of investors. And if this critical minority divests, the other investors will follow because they will be afraid of losing their money, basically. So they don't need to have environmental motivation, but they will just be kind of afraid of losing money. So kind of for economic reasons, they will also divest. Yeah? So and similar dynamics can be observed in those other areas as well. That sort of like a small change can lead to, up on a certain point can lead to very rapid changes. And here I kind of put it in a bit nicer way together. So here are those tipping elements kind of ordered on a social structure system layers. From kind of resource allocation, market exchange, so technology and governance, policies and regulations, infrastructure, and finally custom norms and religion. And here are those kind of the time scales. Yeah? So this is the estimated time that is needed to trigger the tipping within those social subsystems. And on this level, this resource allocation level, changes can happen very rapidly, even within hours, like in financial markets. But as you kind of go up, the changes are happening more slowly. And kind of if you are on this level of norms and values, changes even take more than 30 years. But on the other hand, just keep in mind that it's not like the year 0 of global decarbonization, that those processes have started like actually probably around 30 or maybe even 40 years ago. So sort of like, so we might actually experiencing this kind of tipping process there. And of course, those subsystem elements are interconnected. So there are those kind of interactions between the social tipping elements. And in a way, it's also kind of a chance that sort of, in theory, things could happen very rapidly, because like if you push changes at this, at a certain level, through those interactions, also changes at other levels might speed up. And of course, there are also interactions with the kind of Earth system. Yeah? So through the greenhouse gas emissions and land use, there might be kind of also feedbacks. from the Earth system on the social system. So kind of some examples of those feedbacks would be like, for instance, some climate disasters. Yeah, so during climate disasters or after climate disasters, sort of like people are more willing usually to accept radical policy changes. So there might be those kind of windows of opportunity that kind of might enable sort of like a rapid policy changes. So there, or maybe also, but not only policy, but sort of also mental changes. And of course, now those kind of disasters don't necessarily need to be related only to climate. So in a way now during the Corona crisis, it's similar, so that many people realize how dependent we are actually on the environment, and that we are actually a part of the environment, and there are those kind of health risks that can seriously impact all other areas of our life, and it may be that people are becoming more aware and also more willing to accept kind of more environmental policies. So it's important to kind of also to use those kind of windows of opportunities. Okay, maybe one more question, like why should we care about those kind of slow system changes and not only focus on those rapid changes? So sort of what I argue is that if you work on those kind of lower system levels, like you will constantly have to deal with a rebound effect, because of sort of because those kind of higher system structure layers, they will sort of like kind of bounce back the system, yeah. So that's why, like, working with education system and those norms, and so someone was in the waiting room, so I just let them in. And norms and value systems, and also so those kind of slow system changes, they are very important for kind of stabilizing the whole system. Yeah. So in a way, if you want to avoid this kind of rebound effect, you cannot take care only of those rapid changes, but or kind of changes that may occur very, very rapidly. But you have to kind of take care of the system stabilization. So also kind of like infrastructure, and and those kind of normative changes and education changes are extremely important. Okay, I will get to the next slide. So this example of my recent work, that it's actually like the agency is very important that we have. Yes, so sort of like within each of those tipping elements, like there are different types of agents that have the ability to kind of to lead or start those kind of rapid changes. And very often kind of social sciences or economics also oscillates here, like on those kind of layers of everyday and individual agency. However, I think we have to think more about this kind of collective dimension of agency, and also strategic and political agency. So strategic agency, it's a kind of agency that we have in changing the system structure, actually. And collective agency is the agency that we have as groups. So think about like one school child, and this child like has very little agency on his or her own. But if you have now like millions of school children on the streets, then they can lead to very important changes, yeah, and that's actually happening. So I think sort of like, looking at those kind of non-standard levels of areas of agency is very important. And finally, this is also an example of my recent work. So I think I by accident I kind of drawn on the screen. Sorry. So inequalities. Yeah, this is another like very important aspect. So if you look at this historic emissions, actually like a very small number of people contributed to a lot of emissions, and also these are people who have very high agency, because usually they are educated and they are kind of more wealthy. And I think this is kind of also the key to speeding up decarbonization, that people who are responsible for higher emission shares and have higher agency, they have to also take more responsibility. And we also need a social process and discussion, maybe kind of participatory process, even to decide on how to allocate their mining carbon budget in a kind of just way. And it's kind of what I'm doing in my most recent research. So I'm looking kind of at how to downscale and allocate their mining carbon budget among different citizen emission profiles. Okay, and this is my last slide, so some conclusions. So what I learned in my research is that there's sort of like no one silver bullet, for rapid decarbonization. You need like more kind of a silver backshot, so kind of combination of different elements that are also kind of adjusted to different kind of social, cultural, political settings. Also, technology alone will not lead to that deep transformation. So we need those kind of slow system changes, like values, norms, and education are important for stabilizing the new emerging system. And this is this kind of multiple evidence that actually like small minorities can tip the majority, but they have to be kind of committed and activated. And in a way, we are all in those critical minorities. So like, or we can activate our agency. So energy producers, energy ministers, but also teachers, educators, local governments, citizens groups, and financial investors, producers. So they are all important for kind of activating those dimensions of human agency in decarbonization. Okay, I will finish here, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Ilona, for your presentation. If there are any questions, you can type them in the chat, and I will ask them to Ilona.
I can ask a starting question maybe to Ilona, yeah?
Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ilona. It was a great presentation. I was very fascinated by your slides, and especially the slide where you showed also the to induce a global social tipping point. And very interesting to see all the different social tipping mechanisms also acting on various timescales. Is that something which might also be regionally specified? I mean, for example, like a region like Bavaria, for example, or a region like South Holland, in which I'm living. Is that possible at all? Is that something which is in the works, or could it also be more efficient maybe in getting a transition rolling?
You mean sort of to activate like different regions, or
yeah, to activate. Yeah, it's a global system right now, right? So it's a global view. Can you also adapt that on a more regional scale, so that for example,
yes, okay,
people, yeah.
I mean, I understand. So exactly. So in a way, my analysis was at the global level, but I think if you talk about like some concrete regions, or maybe also different world regions, I think the mechanism or tipping will be a bit different, yeah. Just to give an example, maybe in Western Europe or in South Holland, those changes might be driven by maybe centralization of energy production, yeah, and sort of, but maybe in other world regions, some other changes are more important, like for instance, like building carbon, like in kind of mega cities and very rapidly developing world regions, maybe kind of building climate neutral cities would be more important. Or maybe in some other regions, so maybe kind of education changes will lead, or a kind of normative changes will lead those changes. So, or maybe changes on financial markets. So, so sort of like, I think at the end, of course, those pathways have to kind of come together. And in a way, I think this kind of participatory process is very important. So actually what has been proposed in the UK, or what is discussed there, is kind of like citizen committees, where sort of like citizens of different regions come together and they decide, you know, what is their priority, how they prefer to achieve these climate goals, and then you can adjust and maybe also have some co-benefits at different scales.
All right, thank you. Maybe small follow-up question, maybe, or
We have. Oh, do you want to go first, or?
just one small question?
Okay,
yes,
sure.
One small follow-up question, maybe, Ilona, is that I was very interested to see also your slide on the financial markets, that like a social tipping point could happen within any hours. I was wondering, is the financial market also aware of their ability to make that change, as far as you know?
Well, maybe not like the biggest investors, but in a way, no, this is happening. It's actually the divestment movement is growing very rapidly all over the world, and like an increasing number of public organizations, but also pension funds or universities are committing to divestments, and even cities. You know, so it's actually like even Berlin committed to divest, and also I know that I think the Dutch pension fund. I have some colleagues in Holland, and they said that actually they had some discussions with the pension fund in Holland, and they agreed to divest. So there's this plan, and I know that there are also some associations of private investors and also some banks, and they want to kind of or they are working on this, or they have some sort of like informal groups where organizations where they kind of agree collectively to divest their assets. So this is happening. Of course, no, I think we need much rapid changes, but this is happening, and I think it might really take off very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question I have is from David. David.
Great, thank you, Sephora, and Ilona. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I'm at the Open University. I've had the pleasure of organising this conference with Sjord and Philip over the last year. Thank you very much. I'm particularly interested in your STE4 on norms and values, and in particular on the relationship between what people know or think they know about a particular problem and how they behave. And I was interested in your comparison between climate change and the pandemic. It strikes me that in both cases there's been sort of organised denial to a certain extent on climate change, and also on knowledge about the virus and the effectiveness of the vaccines and so on. And there's also, we've seen during the pandemic that people will observe rules, or at least most people will observe rules of social distancing, quarantining, self-isolation and so on, but not everybody will, and partly because of the denial movement. So I'm very interested in how you see the relationship between knowledge and your STE4 on norms and values. Thank you again.
Thank you. Well, so maybe first talk about this denial movements. Actually, it's actually a minority that is actually changing the discussion in the majority of the society. So in a way, it's the same mechanism, but of course it goes in the other direction. But maybe we can learn something from this. That actually, if you have those kind of active minorities, they can change the whole debate in the society. So in a way, we have to. Those who care, you cannot just kind of passively listen to this, so we have to react, and kind of everyone, and I know on social media, I know on the protests and so on. So I think if we kind of actively oppose this, we can kind of push it down, and maybe also on the norms and values. This is extremely interesting, and sort of also kind of from a historical perspective. So I read some historical literature about the abolition of the slavery movement, and in a way, many people think that it was driven by technology, but if you read the historical sources, it actually the movement started by normative changes in the UK. So there was kind of like a small group of a few persons, kind of elite persons, of course, that time, and they sort of so this was what they kind of put forward, that that having slaves is actually it's not moral. And in a way, by this kind of moral change, so it kind of made the space for the new technology that was that time there, but it wasn't cheap, it wasn't kind of available, but it was there, but it somehow not could expand. So and actually, if you look at the number of the slaves that was traded internationally at the end of the 18th and early 19th century, actually those numbers decreased very rapidly, like within like just a few years. And in a way, also stuff like maybe there are some parallels that maybe this is what is happening now. We need to pay more attention to kind of normative levels. So in a way, if you think of yourself as a sort of like moral person, you should not use fossil fuels, and try to. I mean, if you have no choice, if you are I don't know, just kind of struggling to survive, and you have I don't know, maybe no job or very little job, maybe your age is very low, but if you can afford this, then you should think, okay, what can you do? I know, install a solar panel on your roof, and if you need to drive, then maybe get an electric car or some sort of shared car and so on. So I think there are many options, but I think we tend to think too much in terms of kind of cost and benefits, what pays off. But actually, what is driving many people is actually this kind of this image, that of yourself, but also kind of where you want to be, and so like what is also kind of modern, what is kind of a good thing to do, and I think this is kind of happening. So if you looked at actually like those big car companies start to announce that they will produce only electric cars by, I don't know, 2030 or 2025. So I mean, this is slowly happening here, that sort of, you don't want to sort of identify yourself with this kind of dirty energy that is causing people to die and human suffering and many illnesses and so on. So I think this is a very important level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few more questions in the chat that I think we have time to address. So the first one is from Timon. He asks, you mentioned that the slow social systems are also important because they could cause a rebound effect. Does the climate systems also cause such a rebound, as it works on a slower scale than the social systems?
Well, so I think this is a question more for climate scientists. But in a way, yes, so I think the mechanisms are very similar. Yes, so you have some kind of slower processes also in climate systems, like the sort of the changes like in the ice age and so on, those kind of systems, the changes in those kind of slower dynamics of the climate systems, and in a way, there to a certain extent they surpassed is what is happening at those kind of shorter time scales, and they kind of dominate those changes. But of course, the time scales are we are talking about like thousands of years, and in a way, like you have also like kind of this very short kind of oriented, short-time oriented, this kind of climate or weather variability, and those kind of slower kind of climate processes. Yes, so I think in a way this is similar, but of course, but this question should be probably addressed to climate scientists. So my background is in kind of social sciences, economics, and a bit complex system theory. But but it is an interesting question. Thank you.
Nice. We do have some climate scientists in our audience, so maybe they could respond to that in the chat also. The next question is from Kelly. She asks, you explained how there can be a rebound effect when you only focus to change the faster moving levels. I wonder how you'd reflect on the concept of technological fixes. Do those influence the slow social systems sufficiently? I'm thinking of, for instance, carbon capture and storage technologies or cultured meat.
Yes, I mean, well, first of all, I think we have this kind of idea that the technology is driving human development. I think, you know, it's not, I mean, this is sort of like, it's not that, you know, that completely true. I think in a way, you know, there are those kind of interactions with the technology, but in a way, if you look at the technology development in the past, so each kind of new technology development stage now solved some problems, but also created new problems. And actually in the kind of global scale, like each kind of what we think like a more advanced technology actually increases the resource and energy use. So in a way, you know, those kind of new technologies, they might also create some new traps, yeah, or new problems. And like regarding like carbon capture and storage, well, to my knowledge, there's no actually a kind of reliable technology that can be applied as at the global scale, you know, except maybe like growing more trees and land use changes. But there's no technology. So this is kind of promise or hope that, you know, that there will be some miracle happening and there will be this new carbon capture storage technology, and we just kind of continue as we. No, we can continue using fossil fuels and we just push them somewhere underground. But there is no technology at the moment that is kind of capable of doing it at kind of reasonable energy cost, and also without like massive risks of. Yes, so well, I wouldn't hope for this too much. And regarding cultural media, I think it's. I mean, overall, we have to reduce the meat consumption, but maybe, you know, cultured meat is some good alternative, or like maybe also meat produced from insects. Yeah, I'm completely open to this, and I think this could be some chance. But again, you know, like this technology can create some new problems and also maybe health risks that we are not aware of. So that's why I think. Yeah, one should be very careful and not, you know, hope, just keep doing what we do and hope, okay, there will be some technology that will sort of save us. I think this will not happen in this way.
Thank you very much, Ilona, for your answer. There's one final question by Tulia, and then our time is also over. Is there a possible relationship between social system and the climate system in the actual cooling, I think, of the climate? I think that's what she means.
Yeah, so in a way, no, this final figure with the social tipping elements and interactions with the climate system element, climate tipping elements, like it showed that yes, no, there is a relationship. So in a way, no, so well, our social system is causing the CO2 emissions that you know that causes massive changes in the climate system. And in a way, if we manage to reduce the emissions, like we can sort of like push the climate system into this, or kind of keep it within this kind of stability basin within, you know, we are now. So of course, no, there are those interactions, but if you are asking me, like, are we capable of maybe inducing like the next ice age? I think so. Some colleagues of mine actually has done research about it, and this research is showing that the amount of emissions that we have released in the climate to the climate system is actually has postponed the next ice age, like I think for like 20,000 years or so. You know, so at those kind of very long time scales, yeah, maybe we can kind of interact with those dynamics, but it looks like, no, we are actually we have already pushed the system out of this pathway. And of course, now at those kind of thousands of years of time scales that the kind of the, well, so, or maybe no, other way, you know, so I think that the Earth will be fine, you know, if you think about those kind of thousands or even millions of years, the Earth will survive the human civilization and climate change and so on. But of course, there will be massive changes, and at the stake actually is our species, yeah, because the Earth will survive this, you know, in some way. Maybe with some changes, but it will be fine, yeah. But at the stake, you know, it's our civilization, because this is what we are, the way, you know, how we interact with the planetary forces right now. It's actually dangerous to us, you know, and to our civilization, yeah. So yeah, so I would say we are at the stake, and we should kind of save our species, and this is what we should, I think, care about. In a way, if we save our species, then and kind of manage to build like a sustainable relationship with the Earth system, yeah, then I think we have a chance to become kind of like more stewards of the planet and establish like a sustainable relationship. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilona. Sure, can I just ask you to come, looking at the time, it's already 10, to end this meeting formally. And then we're looking forward in half an hour to your masterclass, Ilona. Our PhD students are very excited. And a shame you can't be there with us today.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you for all the questions. And it was great to see you virtually.
Okay, so thank you, Ilona, again, also in my name for this great talk, and also the discussion was very fruitful. So this ends the keynote talks today. So thank you all for participating, and we hope to see you back indeed in the talking circles today, and also browse the great program which still have in the conference, all the great posters and discussions and talks which are there to see in asynchronous and synchronous sessions, and the closing ceremony at 4 this afternoon.
Yes.
All right.
That's correct.
Bye.
Mm-hmm. Okay.